Here we go.
As the longest track family of tornadoes moved into Ottawa County and took the first life, the county had already seen one tornado doing damage. The cell, which first dropped a brief tornado in Saline County at 5:10 p.m., put down a second at the eastern edge of Bennington at 5:20. One couple was injured at a cafe, and a father and son suffered burns in a gas fire as they sought shelter near the Ottawa County State Fishing Lake. After causing extensive damage to 5 mobile homes, a house, service station, and the cafe, the tornado moved northeast into Clay County.
You got to drive through Kansas to appreciate it. One of the prettiest places in Kansas is the Flint Hills. You can have your mountains and then your seashores. Flint Hills is every bit as nice, every bit as pretty, especially in the spring. My name's Clayton Wright. I live here in Clay Center. I was born and raised here in Clay Center. Well, I come from a large family. All my family was in Clay County people for a long time, but there were 11 of us in our family. I'm the second oldest. To date, we're 9 of us living. Well, Mom was a stay-at-home mom, and Dad, he was a mason, bricklayer, block layer, poured concrete. That's what he did most all his life. So I've lived here most of my life, except for about 3 years in the military, and then 7 years I worked for the Highway Patrol at other locations. Other than that, most of my life's been spent here in Clay Center. I'm 73 years old now. All my schooling was here in Clay Center. Grade school, junior high, high school. I graduated from high school in 1960 and went directly from high school to the Navy and spent about 3 years and 3 months in the Navy. And got out of the Navy, I came back to Clay Center and worked for a gas company at a booster station locally for about 1.5 years. I had a friend in law enforcement who was Bill Gonzer, who was the sheriff I served under even. And I got to know from working at a service station in high school, a trooper that worked here and worked out of here that I kind of admired him. Don Witham was his name. And so I had some interest in it all the time. And when I worked for the gas company, the booster station had large engines and the buildings would be quite hot in the summertime. And I remember that one day going to the window to get some fresh air, and I seen a patrol car drive by with the windows up, and I knew he was in air conditioning, and I said, I might want to try that. Applied for and was accepted for the Highway Patrol and did that for 7 years before moving back to Clay Center. The 7 years on the patrol were spent in McPherson, Salina, and Junction City. Any police work has got its highs and its lows every day, so they're all different. Every day's different. Some are exciting and some are kind of boring. As a trooper, you mainly worked traffic. So that's when I left patrol to get into other things other than traffic. And then 1 year prior to the tornado, in '72, I left the patrol and went on the sheriff's office here in Clay County as the undersheriff. And I worked there almost a year before we were caught in a tornado. Well, it's kind of a rewarding job. It can be rewarding. The bad things are a couple of incidents that were bad things that still stick with me. Was working accidents, especially fatalities that involved children. And the hardest job was notifying next of kin. That was the hardest. I did not like that at all, and had to do it a number of times. The worst was probably a relative. Had to tell a relative that his twin brother was killed and his other brother, 2 brothers were killed in a traffic accident. That was one of the harder times. Not even close. That's all fantasy. Most of it's fantasy. Or big city. In rural America, it's not like that. It wasn't like that. It may be today, but it wasn't like that then. Things were a lot different. You didn't have the crazies. You had some crazies, but they weren't as crazy back in. I was in the '60s and the '70s. So there were some tougher times because we had the Vietnam War, we had racial riots, and kind of things like that, but we didn't have the drug problem that you have today that really pulls the crazies out. So it's a lot different. On September 25th, 1973, I was the undersheriff in Clay County. Had got home late afternoon from working. I don't recall we had much going on that day. And I got home and I was watching the news on television. It was WIBW News out of Topeka. And they talked about a storm just hitting Salina. And with the tornadoes on the ground. Salina headed northeast. And so I decided maybe we better go back to work. So I went out, and I was still in uniform, got in a patrol car, went and picked up the sheriff, who was Bill Gonser. I had taken him home at the end of the shift. His car was in the shop. And I picked him up, and we headed to the southwest part of Clay County on Blacktop County roads. And it started raining on us, I don't know, probably 8-10 miles outside of town. As we came here that night, right here's where we started noticing the clouds going southwest to northwest, fast. Right as we came up here, we got to the top of the hill here, we stopped right in this area, started watching the clouds, and the thing I remembered and learned that day was the clouds were low to the ground, moving from southeast to northwest fast, really moving fast. And I don't remember ever noticing clouds doing that before. And we sat there and it was raining. We had stopped there on a curve. It was raining quite hard. So Bill said, let's go over a mile, because the blacktop went a mile west and turned south. And I was driving, so I went a mile west and turned to go south and just got around the corner. Then it started raining heavy. Then we came around this curve. And keeping in mind this farmstead was not here at the time. And right about here, and it was like we drove into a garage. The rain just abruptly stopped. And right away I saw a tornado. I knew it was really low to the cloud was really low to the ground. It wasn't a long funnel cloud. It was just a real short, stubby cloud. Just like I drove into the garage, the rain stopped. By the time I got the car stopped, I was just right about here. And I stopped the car, and I knew right away what it was because it's a big cottonwood trees there. The east side of the road, the branches were breaking off. They were large branches, would break off and would come at us and would turn. They wouldn't hit us, they were coming right at us, but they never reached us. So I knew what it was, and Bill knew what it was. So I went to get out of the car. You can see a lot of the cottonwoods are cut down now. All big cottonwoods. They were breaking off, coming right at us, and then turning. I tried to get out and couldn't get out. To get in the ditch, and I couldn't get the door open. There was too much pressure, I guess. And I'd unhooked my seatbelt, and Bill laid down in the seat. Bill was a big man, and he had laid down on the seat. I had no place to go, so I covered my head and laid against the steering wheel and just shut my eyes, and I felt the car moving backwards. Retrospect, I should have drove in the ditch, but this is where we got hit. We took off going that way. Back to my right. Thinking, and I stepped on the brake then, well, it was in park. We were airborne, I'm quite sure, because we had lifted up and went backwards. And then we had a lot of spinning, and I know like we were upside down, and then bang. And the lights went out. My lights went out. And we landed. I never did measure this, I don't know for sure. There was a fence post that used to kind of mark it. I landed down there. Just inside of that fence. That's where I woke up. So when I walked back to the road here, that's when I can see the car over the hill that way. Fences were all tore down. There were no fences. And when I woke up, I'm laying, I don't recall now, probably at least 100 yards south of where we had taken off. When the car stopped. When the car took off, it took off north, but we ended up south. But when I woke up, I'm laying on my back, and I'm in the pasture just off the road. And one side of me was a dead cow, and the other side of me was a live sow with one piglet. And I remember trying to get up, and I couldn't move. And then I blacked out again, I guess, because the next thing I remember, I'm on my feet. And I looked around, and I started walking to the road, which was a bit of an incline. And because I couldn't see the car, I didn't know where the car was or anything. And when I got to the road, the first thing I noticed was my gun was laying on the road. So I picked it up and put it away. And I knew my clothes were tore up. I knew I didn't have a shirt on my back. Didn't have any back to my shirt. I had a shirt on the front. I had a huge gash in my thumb area. And I could, a lot of blood. A lot of blood, but it turned out it was just a lot of little nicks all over my face. And a lot of pain in one leg, and this arm here was huge. And then I finally looked to the east, and down in another pasture, probably 40, 50 yards out there, was our car. And Bill was outside the car walking around it. And he was hollering my name, and I yelled at him, but he didn't hear me. The car was probably, I'm going to say 50, somewhere between 50 and 80 yards out in this pasture. Just as it goes over the hump there, I could only see a little bit of the car, but I could see Bill standing by the car, walking around the car. Almost directly east of where I woke up at, in that outside the road. So I walked down to where he was at, and when he heard me, then he turned around and looked at me, and I remember telling him, I said, "Boy, you look like hell." And he said, "Well, you don't look so good yourself." But I noticed he was having trouble breathing. And it turned out, I think it was ribs were broken or something. And he was obviously in shock, as well as I'm sure I was, but I knew then I needed to keep talking to him. So I talked to him, and I said, "I'm going to go get some help. You stay here." So I headed for the road, but he followed me up the road, through the pasture up on the road, and I said, "Just stay here and I'll go to the farmhouse." This is the hill I walked up going the wrong way. And so I walked to the hill and remember looking around thinking, wow, what a storm, because that whole farmstead's gone. And so I turned around and looked at Bill, and I realized then that I'd went the wrong way. So I turned and went back down the hill and told him that, and just kind of made a joke out of it. But anyway, I started walking back the other direction, and I decided to cut across through a pasture to go to this house, and I remember I couldn't get through the fences. They were just, the wires were strung tight and I couldn't get through. And then I just blacked out again, because the next thing I remember, I'm in the pasture, and there's a stream of water in it, and I know I can't get across it. And then I don't remember anything again for a short period of time, then I'm at the fence again. But I went through the ditch to the water, because I'm at the other fence, across from the Taylor's home. The next thing I remember was standing at the fence right here. This is where they picked us up. The ambulance got us. So I went up there to the house, and the lady came out, and there were two little girls with her. And I remember telling her, go in the house and call the sheriff's office and tell them CY2 said, turn on the sirens. CY2 was my radio number. And so she did. She went in the house, and she came back out, and she said, I asked her, I said, you didn't think to call an ambulance, did you? She said, well, no. So I said, I'll do that. So I went in and I called the sheriff's office and talked to Carolyn, and said, I didn't want to tell her how bad things really were, so I said, our car's kind of bent up and we need a ride. Send the ambulance down to get us. Never did find the binoculars. This tornado that went through here is not the one that hit Clay Center. It went west of Clay Center. The one that hit Clay Center was approximately 2 hours later. I think they said when I had called and said turn the sirens on, they had clear blue skies when they turned them on. That being in a different storm. It took the ambulance quite a long while to find us. Because back then we just, where Taylor's was, it wasn't an intersection or anything like that, just landmarks. So the ambulance finally got there and we headed back to town. Now it's starting to rain hard again, and I remember I rode up front and had to tell the ambulance driver to slow down. He was driving way too fast for that rain. Anyway, and we got out of the rain pretty quick and we got to town. And I believe it was just shortly after 6 when we got hit. We found out later, but we got to town and it was probably 7:30 or so by the time we got here. They took Bill right in and they sent me back in a room to take a shower because I was just dirty, filthy, sandy, and muddy. And I think the same one that, the same one that got us hit this farmstead here. Took the top story off of it. And I remember taking a shower and coming out of the shower and they handed me pajama bottoms. That's all because my clothes were all tore up anyway. And I went to the emergency room and a doctor went into the emergency room and he was going to work on my knee because it was all cut open. And I remember he gave it 3 or 4 or 5 shots, I don't remember what it was, to kill it or deaden it. And he had just pulled the needle out and I said, Doc, I hear a noise like another tornado. And he said, oh, you just need to relax. And then the lights went out in the hospital.
As the cell from Saline County moved from the Oak Hill area toward Clay Center, western Kansas had another F3 touch down at 6:30, 3 miles east-northeast of Ford, and lift 10 miles northeast of Ford, damaging farm buildings. But the storm which threw the sheriff's car showed up at the same 6:30 mark west of a farmstead owned by Clarence and Margery Urban. Margery was a nurse on call for the Clay County Hospital when the tornadoes came calling.
I've just been thinking the last couple of days of how many of the people that I could remember were there, but so many of them are dead. Well, my name is Margery, M-A-R-G-E-R-Y, nobody gets it right, Emma Roll Urban. And I was born on my grandparents' farm in Grant Township, east of Clay Center, in 1930, April the 26th of 1930. I'm 85 years old. My grandparents came from Germany. My mother was English and French. My dad was German. And she made all the bridesmaids' dresses. My mother was a seamstress at that time. She made a lot of wedding dresses. She did a lot of sewing. My parents were farmers. My dad was a farmer. My mother was a school teacher until she got married. She taught at Strawberry. That's a little town north and east that's nothing but a big sign now, but it was a little town north and east of Clifton. Two sisters, both younger, Betty and Marie. Betty and I did not care too much for Marie, but let anybody else pick on her, and we were on them like I don't know what. We did all of the things that kids did. We played ball and we played ante-I over the cob house behind the school. That was throwing a ball over and you catch it, and if you caught it and came around real fast and tagged one of the kids on the other side, then they got to be on your side. And the thing was to get everybody on the same side. We used to have a lot of fun with that. And my name came from a lady who was in England who knew my grandmother Bullimore. That was my mother's mother. And I don't know that Mom liked it, and so that's what I was named. Emma is, my dad had a sister Emma. My mother had a sister Emma. My great-great-grandmother's name was Emma. And back in the genealogy of my grandmother, there was a bunch of Emmas, so it's a family name. Well, my grandparents' farm was just about half a mile from the schoolhouse. His name was Deweyville. Deweyville. Little one-room schoolhouse. I walked when I wasn't supposed to because I wanted to learn how to read. So every chance I got, I ran away from home and went to school. And I think I was probably about 5, and they didn't start kids until they were 6 in that country school. But my dad got tired of going to school to bring me home, so they went to the school board, and the school board held a special meeting and said that I could come to school. And I learned to read. That's all I wanted to do. I wanted to learn to read. I went to Bethany Hospital School of Nursing in Kansas City, Kansas. Well, they don't do it that way anymore, but we lived there. We lived in the dormitories that were attached to the hospital. We had our own rooms. They were either 2 girls or 1 girl. I had 2 roommates, and both of them quit, so I got my room by myself. And everything was given to you. I mean, my uniforms, my linens, the meals, everything was provided. And we had to sign out when we went any place, and we were supposed to be home by 10 o'clock on weekdays, and we got to stay out till 12 o'clock on weekends. Oh, we just learned things as we went along. We went to school, we had classes, and as we got a little farther along, we would have maybe 2 classes and then work for the other 6 hours. We started out, we would maybe only work 1 hour on the floor. And what that was mainly changing sheets and running bedpans, because they had no showers like they do now, and you bathed the patients. I mean, they told you how to bathe them. You washed down as far as possible, and you washed up as far as possible, and then you handed the washcloth to the patient and said, now you wash possible. And I think one of my most embarrassing moments when I was in nurses training, I came barreling out of a patient's room with a basin of dirty water and ran right smack dab into my supervisor. Water. She was really nice about it, but she had to change her uniform. But that was so embarrassing. So I graduated on the 31st of August of 51, went home the 1st of September, and I had my uniform on, and I was going down to show the neighbor lady what I looked like in my uniform. And she only lived a little ways away, so it was nothing much. When I got home, Risa Needham and Donna Gunter and another nurse, and I can't remember her name, were sitting in a car in my folks' front yard. She wanted to know if I could come to work that night. I'd been home not even 24 hours. And I said, well, yeah, but I still want my 2 weeks vacation. She said, well, we just need somebody to work tonight. Well, tonight turned into 3 nights, but I finally got my vacation. And then after this all happened, I went back to work, and I went back to work in surgery. That's what they hired me for. And I worked there in surgery. This was in the old hospital. There's 2 hospitals in Clay Center up on 7th Street. The old one now is a museum, but at that time that's where I went to work, and I worked there for 10 years. Then I took 6 years off to have Casey and get him in school. I worked there for 10 years, and then they broke ground for the new hospital in '61, and I think they finished it in '64 or '65. And they didn't have enough nurses, so they sent out a plea, and I went in, and I told them I'll work 2 days a week. Well, 2 days got to be 3 days and 4 days until I was working full time again. And then I was there until '92. Well, there were a few years in there. There were 2 years when I worked on the floor, and there was from '59 to '61 when I was director of nursing. And the rest of them were all surgery nurses, nursing stuff. On September the 25th, 1973, a tornado went right through almost our yard. Well, I need to say this. We had just built a new house. We just finished it in '72 and moved in. And so we did not want a tornado. But a tornado went through. The sheriff was sitting up on a hill with a deputy, and the tornado hit his car and just rolled it. Just rolled it. It's a wonder they weren't both killed. And we were here in our house with Casey, who was 11, and our twin nieces and nephews, who were about 9, and we were watching them because their parents had gone to Topeka to pick up a big truck. But anyway, we saw this. To me, it looked like a flat roll that was going like this. The noise was horrible. It came across the fields just west of our house. Couldn't have been more than a quarter of a mile. My husband stood on the front porch and he's saying, "Stay up there, baby. Stay up there, baby." And I'd sent the kids to the basement and they're screaming down there. But the one that went through here was not a tornado like this. It was going like this. It looked like just a big ball of dirt. It came from the south and went north. Noisy. It was really, really loud. Just roared. The tornado took the neighbor's chimney, missed the next neighbor, went on across and got one of the neighbor's houses, just twisted it off, and we kept on going and got the next neighbor's garage and whatever. But by that time, we quit worrying about it. We got in the car and started going around to see if the neighbors were all okay. And when we got that done, I called the hospital and asked them if they needed help, and they said, "Yes, come on in." So that's what I did. I went on in. It was a mess.
It would be at least 90 minutes before Nurse Urban made it into the Clay County Hospital, but 6:30 is when the storms entered a new level of activity. Not only the rolling ball tornado and the Ford County tornado, but a simultaneous touchdown 3.5 miles southeast of Nurse Urban. It came from the same cell that had started in Saline County, hit Bennington, and then many farmsteads, even after tossing the sheriff's car. Then it rolled by Margery and Morganville, moving straight north, lifting at Mulberry Creek, leaving behind more heavily damaged farmsteads. The newest member of that cell stayed on the ground, severely damaging the Mitch McMahon farm, destroying the ancient Swedesburg Church, and damaging Garfield Center. Its path left Clay County around 6:45. That cell then moved straight north to where it hit the city of Lynn at 7:05 p.m. It seems likely that Urban's side of that same cell family was producing as well during this first Washington County disaster of the night, as tornadic damage was also happening miles from the Lynn tornado's path in rural areas near Palmer. But 5 miles northeast of Lynn, the Dague family would be very near the 2 longest tornadic tracks of that day.
I am Arlene Dague, and I was Arlene Parker before I was married. I grew up on a farm 2 miles east of here. My dad married my mother, and I was one of 6 kids, 4 girls and 2 boys. I was the middle one, and went to Greenleaf to high school. I went to a little one-room school, Logan Center for grade school. Well, I was a little country girl. It was a big shock to go from a little one-room school to high school, and we had, there was like 8 people in the country school, and when I went to town, we had a class of, we started with 16, but only 11 of us graduated. And it was kind of tough to start with, but you have to do it. And I walked home every day. We lived 4 miles from town. My dad said he'd take me to high school, but in those days, not everybody went to high school. It's not like today. And I walked home every day unless it was raining or snowing. 4 miles. I could do it in an hour. I started when I was 5 because my mother wanted to get rid of me because I kept asking to read books. So I went to school at 5 and I skipped 2nd grade because the school teacher didn't want to have that many classes, so she skipped me and put me in with a 3rd grade person. So I never did learn to write cursive, so my writing is horrible. And went to high school, worked at a bank. Then we went to California. My husband got sick, and so we went to California. Well, I forgot that. Doyle, my husband, grew up on a farm 2 miles west of here. And we went to California, and I lived out there for 6 years. We came back here in '61 with 2 kids, and we bought this farm in '62, and we built this house in '70, and we built everything on here ourselves, except we hired the REA to put in the electricity. Everything else was done with our own little hammer and nails. My husband died of cancer in '83, and my daughter was a passenger in a car in '86 after she'd been married 6 months and she got killed. She was a meteorologist in Texas. And I have a son he and his wife teach school. I have 2 granddaughters from them, and my other son was married. He is divorced. He lives in Denver, and he has 3 children. And they're all in college now. That's about my life. I work in a museum, and it's fun. And you never know who will walk in the door. I enjoy doing it. It's better than sitting at home and watching the boob tube. Well, I try to get there by 8:30, but we're not supposed to be open till 9 or 9:30, but I don't like to go to the coffee shop, so I decided instead of going stir crazy, I'd do something for the county, because the county, when my husband died and when my daughter died, a lot of people were really good to me and I wanted to pay them back. That's why I started. Genealogy is what I do. So they asked me if I'd be treasurer, because I like to do figures. I said, yeah, I would. So then I thought, well, if I'm going to be treasurer, I'd be a better help to go down there. So I went down there and I started reading old newspapers and taking out births, deaths, and marriages. Somehow I got graduated to inputting into the computer. I used to help my husband farm. I helped outside. I loved to calve cows. So my husband would always buy a bunch of heifers and I would calve them out, and then we would sell them as cow and calf pair. We made pretty good, lots of times money that way. We planted probably 500 acres of wheat, between 3 to 5, because we changed a lot with shatter cane. And 500 acres of corn, and the rest was milo and beans. Well, we had a sale. He knew it wasn't going to work, or he had cancer of the colon and it had already metastasized. So we had planned on a sale, and he died the 7th of March, and our sale was the 23rd of March, and we sold my cows and everything. And then I went to work for a feed company, did their books for 8 years, and then I got a chance to go to the veterinarians and help do the books and help small animals, and I liked that much better. It wasn't lifting feed sacks and doing books. we had Washington County had a lot of puppy mills, and the people would grow puppies and sell them to different places, and I like to birth the puppies. Murray is standing up with his leg on the fireplace. Oh, this was a Sunday afternoon in '73, July or August, when we didn't have any farm work to do, and we would go fishing. It's Murray and Penny and Monty, and they were 9, 10, and 11 in this picture. So we went fishing in a farm pond, and Murray, he always seems like he shoots the biggest deer and he catches the biggest fish, but he got the biggest fish that day. Well, it was in the Washington County News. He was living it up. He always loved to beat us. When we'd go deer hunting, he could walk through and I'd send him where I knew there wasn't no deer and he'd come out dragging one. But I still beat him on I got horns with 19 points on. He's never got that yet. He's tried, but he hasn't done it.
That is a picture of me catching the biggest fish.
I told you he'd say that.
And I'm not sure that I didn't catch the rest of the fish too, but that, might just be my memory. But no, we had a good time fishing all the time. And it was kind of like Mom alluded to earlier, that I always seemed to find the biggest fish or biggest deer. That it was just one of those things.
But to tell you the truth, I told him about your little 2-pointer that you shot, and then you came down and claimed the one I shot.
No.
Yeah, you did too.
There's a tag for all of them. Yeah. We had some good time fishing. Mainly farm ponds fishing, and every once in a while go down to Wakefield and set some lines, bank lines and pole lines. But some really good memories. I'm Margery Dague. I was born in February 22nd, 1964, at the Washington County Hospital here in Washington County. I'm 51 years of age. In 1973, when the tornado went through, I was a little over 9 years old. And we were living here at the time when I was with my brother and sister, and Mom and Dad were here. We built this house in 1970, and I helped move belongings in my little Red Ryder wagon, pulling them up the path to the house. And we used to have an old cattle barn where I'd go out there and rope the baby calves, and I'd get pulled around inside the little barn by the calves after I roped one. And we used to have a really big strawberry patch. And I'm sure I ate more strawberries than I ever picked, but it was a lot of fun.
Well, we live in this draw out here goes north to south, and it seems like a lot of them follow it part way anyway. Lynn won the night that Greenleaf was hit, and Lynn were hit at the same night. From Wichita on up, it seems like we have a lot of tornadoes, though.
Well, I've seen plenty of tornadoes, and if I don't see another one, it won't bother me a bit.
On September 25th, 1973, I don't remember exactly what we were doing, but we were in the house getting ready to eat supper, and my friend called me up, and her husband was a spotter it was dreary and dark outside, and he was a spotter for tornado watch, weather watcher at Washington. And Marvel says, Lynn got hit by a tornado and it's heading north and east. You better head for the storm shelter. We had one in our basement. We'd built one. So Doyle took the kids and went down there, and I couldn't get him off the phone. I remember hearing a noise that sounded, like a train, really. It came awful close, and then it went east, and it hit a shed that was over east and tore it up. It kept getting louder and louder, and I said, Marvel, I think the tornado's getting close, I better go. So I hung up and I got downstairs, but I never did get to the storm shelter because then the roaring stopped. So we came up, and our guttering was torn off the south side of the house, and our garage doors, the south one was straight in and the north one was sticking straight out. That was about all we had done here at the house with that tornado. We'd already had several others before that. The first tornado I ever saw was it hit Lynn back in '63, and then it came north, and Doyle laid down in the grader ditch. But we saw it hit Lynn. It hit the school and took the gymnasium off of the school. And then we had another one. I lived through 5 tornadoes out here. We had another one that come, and we'd set a basketball court on the east end of the house, west end of the house, and it took the net off of the pole, and then it went up in the cow lot and picked up a big hay bale holder, and I don't know where it was. We never did find it. And then another one come through, and we had a big barn down at the corner on the Bell place, and we had a WPA toilet up here that we'd brought from north of Marville, and that one tornado took the WPA toilet and took it upside down, and it was all cement on the bottom, and it just smashed it. And then went down and took the big barn down on the corner and just took it all. And then it went northeast from here. And then there was another one. We have that big dryer up there in the Quonset, and there was a storage bin on the north side. But that dryer, it took the top and dented it all in, and then it took off with it and took it down we had a big silo down at the corner, and it took the pieces of the dryer bin and dumped them in our silo. And then it went across the road and got our barn. There was a big cow barn over there, and it's gone now too. And then, let's see, the other one, I don't know, it went through and just took out the electricity. But after Murray moved here, he had one, and it jumped the dryer bin, but it took the storage bin that was next to it, and he never did replace it. He just kept the insurance money. So that's my tornadoes. I've lived through 5 tornadoes. I can remember a lot of snow when I was back in '51. I had the kids had to go to Clifton to a ball game, and it was snowing, and they had to go, so Doyle took the kids and I stayed home, and Monty was playing ball, so Monty rode the school bus. And coming home, Doyle's truck got snow in it and choked out there at the Palmer corner. And the school bus come along and picked him up and brought him on home. And some of the kids knew they couldn't get to Greenleaf, so they stayed here all night. I probably had 10 kids here that night off the school bus besides my own. That was the day I was talking on the telephone to Marvel. Bob had called and said there was a tornado hit Lynn. And remember, Doyle took you guys downstairs, and I was still talking on the phone to Marvel. And you went in the storm shelter.
Yep.
And you don't remember anything else, do you?
Oh, I remember going downstairs and Dad telling us to get in the storm shelter, and forcing us in there, and there's a bunch of bottles of elderberry wine and choke
Don't
cherry
tell them about that.
and Irish whiskey and dandelion wine. And as soon as Dad got us in the storm shelter, we, of course, were scared. And my sister was 2 years older.
1 year old.
And she was really scared, and all of us were. But then Mom came in, and then she left. And Dad was out on the patio checking out, see if he could find the tornado, see it. And then a little bit after that, all of a sudden there was a popping noise, and something ricocheted inside the shelter. And I remember Penny screaming, and what was that? And we looked around, and then all of a sudden another bottle popped. So the caps were popping off the elderberry wine, and there might have even been some root beer at the time.
Yeah, I always made root beer for you guys.
And dandelion wine, and so that, stuff was coming out. And got you in trouble, didn't I?
You have to bring that up. Oh, we have lots of elderberries on Grandpa's. We had lots of elderberries, and they were back in there, couldn't get sprayed, so my friend out in California sent me a elderberry or a wine making book and said, why don't you try making wine? And that was about the time everybody was making the grape juice in a bottle and putting a balloon on top and making wine, a gallon of wine. Well, I bought some crock pots, and Doyle went to a sale and he come home with a 50-gallon one, so I thought, well, I'll make elderberry wine, because we had lots of elderberries. So I made elderberry wine. So then the next year I made elderberry and dandelion. Well, the elderberry was good, and the dandelion tasted like silage to me. It has to wait about 8 years. About 8 years later, I gave it away to Uncle Floyd, and he come back to get more because he said that was the best wine he'd ever drank. And I gave it all away. But then the next year after that, I started making Irish whiskey with potatoes. And it wasn't so bad, but it was pretty strong because we had some friends come down one night and played cards, and she got up to go to the bathroom. This was in the old house before we built this. And she hit the bathroom door and knocked herself out on the floor. So it was pretty strong.
It was definitely interesting. We've had several tornadoes go past this house, and we've been very fortunate. Guttering torn off and trees uprooted and lost the garage doors, but
You never replaced the final grain bin.
lost a grain bin. It smashed it like a pop can. But we were fortunate at that time. I think we just had some limb damage, if I remember right. And very surreal, I guess. I mean, it was just, when we went over there that next day, it was just damage everywhere.
Well, the whole downtown was destroyed. That's what was so bad.
Everybody always says it sounds like a train, but it's just a lot of wind. Just a big roar of wind. And all of them basically, they've come through here, have had the basic same sound. Some of them are a lot louder than others, but it's just big roar, 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 big roar.
89 miles an hour, I got pulled over.
No, there ain't no beauty in them. They're just destructive.
What makes me chase tornadoes? Thrill to hunt. Some people like to go out and shoot bears.
I think there's something wrong with people that chase tornadoes.
Even those guys that were doing search and rescue were in shock.
Had a tornado come down on top of me at night.
Just a note, we had a curfew one night, and they lifted the curfew. The highway patrol brought in a van that they take to disasters and events like that. There were several troopers here, as well as the National Guard. And it was, I think, the night after the curfew. The curfew had been lifted. We had a lot of traffic, a lot of people driving around. We were a little bit worried about looting or anything that could happen again. And kind of on our own, we set the curfew again. We didn't even talk to the mayor. We just stopped everybody and told them, go home, the curfew's back on. And we did that one night. I bet you can't get away with that today.